Well, hi and welcome to Isle of Wight Bushcraft. Do you join me for the second video in this series on knife skills? In this video we'll be looking at maintenance and sharpening, so stay tuned. Well, hi folks, and thank you for joining me in this second video on the series Knife Skills. Now, last time we looked at the kind of knife that we might choose to use in bushcraft, but in this video we're going to concentrate on both sharpening and maintaining our knives. Firstly, let's look at sharpening. Now, sharpening a knife may sound pretty straightforward, but it's a bit of a science in itself, and different ones will have their different ways of sharpening. Something that may be favourable to one may differ from another, and it's not something that you will learn in a few minutes, particularly freehand sharpening. It does need a little bit of practice. It's worth persevering with, because if you've bought the appropriate stones and you learn how to use them, then you should be okay. I always use Japanese water stones. Now, I have made a mistake in the past. I did once use a diamond sharpener, and it probably takes a bit too much metal off and does scratch the bevel of your blade quite a lot. So really and truly, I think within the industry it's known that you shouldn't really use diamonds on steel for sharpening, although I must admit I do use my diamond sharpener for my axe when out in the field, and it does a great job, but that's all I use it for. So we're looking at Japanese water stones really for sharpening, and again, if your knife is really dull, then you really want to get quite a coarse grit, say a 250 or so forth. But providing you keep your knives reasonably maintained, and that's the benefit of maintaining them, then I use the particular stone that I tend to use most of the time is a jewel stone. It's one side is I think it's 800 grit, and then the reverse side is a 3000, and I find that does me fine. Provided I keep my knives reasonably maintained, I can get them I can get a pretty good edge using that stone. Now, it can be difficult to take that out in the field, but there are a couple of things that you can use just to maintain your knife in the field, a strop for example, but we'll go into that in a moment. So first of all, what we'll do is I'll show you the stone that I use and the grits that I use for my knives. So these are the stones that I use. So there you go, they've got two stones in one here. These are not going to last as long, but I've had this for a couple of years now, and it's still perfectly fine and level as well. So this side, you'll see the darker side, that's an 800 grit, a fairly coarse grit. You know, for bringing the edge back, I can get a nice burr in the edge with that, and then of course with this 3000, that really does hold it and polish the bevel nicely. And with that, an Agura stone. That's useful because you can just, once this is soaked in water, put a nice slurry on there, and that does just polishes the blade off nicely. But that's what I use at home, predominantly that stone. And for the field, now this is something that I acquired in when I was up in Lapland recently, and that's the sharpening stone. Now I think that's 1000 grit. A lovely field sharpening stone, quite expensive, but it's quite useful. So I take that with me and use that out in the field just to maintain my blade. Now, in the last video that I made on knives, I did point out what some of the knife parts are called, and I was corrected. I mentioned that part of the blade which curved at the base of the handle was called a choil. That's what I refer to it as, because I don't rightly think that you could refer to it as a guard, because it's not a separate plate that acts as a guard. So I refer to it as a choil, but that's me. But technically speaking, as was pointed out, the choil is actually on the blade itself. And you get two types of choil. There's a sharpening choil, which aids in sharpening the blade, and there's also a finger choil as well, which aids in gripping your knife. So that's why I refer to that as a choil. It's a little area on my jack claw which does aid in grip. So there's a choil there, which you can see is in the unsharpened part of the blade, but there's also one there as well, which is an integral part of the handle and the scales as well. So it has been said that the choil is always on the unsharpened part of the blade, but clearly you can see there it's incorporated into the handle as well. So, but these are for gripping and helping to sharpen. Of course, if that was just straight there and unsharpened, that would be referred to as the ricasso. And on some old swords and daggers, which I'm not into at all, this first part of the blade would be unsharpened, would be referred to as a ricasso. Apparently it just made the swordsmith or the knife smith's job easier. What would be the point in sharpening or bringing an edge to that part of the blade? It's unused. But yeah, it's a choil. Also, I mentioned that it was, I think I said it was 6mm steel, but it's 4mm. I'm always, it's because I'm thinking window, it's because I'm thinking glass, 6mm glass. I know it's 4mm, but in my mind it's always 6. And something else I mentioned as well, I said that it's 02 steel, but it's 01. And I've just got that fixation in my mind, 02, 02. I know it's 01, but I always refer to it as 02. And people always corrected me on that. So apologies for that, if I misled you in that way. It's 01 still. Okay, so what we're going to do first with this Japanese stones, we're going to soak it in a vessel of water. I'm going to give it around about 10 minutes to properly soak. So I'm just going to fill this little tub up and put my stone in. There we are. Now if you've not sharpened, if you've not freehand sharpened your knife before, something that can help you in doing this is a permanent marker, and you can mark the bevel of your blade with a permanent marker. Let it dry, and then when you angle your blade, which I'll demonstrate in a moment, when you angle your blade on the sharpening stone, as you take your each successive stroke, you can check your bevel, and you can see that where the permanent marker is wearing away, you know that that you're angling your knife correctly. If there was a permanent marker left, say toward the edge, and then you just need to put a bit more angle on it. So that can help. Just marking your knife up. You know, if you're starting out, I'd recommend you do that. I think many do. Is just mark your blade up with this permanent marker, and that can help you in knowing that you're sharpening your bevel. In this case, a Scandi grind, which I recommend. You buy a knife with a Scandi grind, and that can help. Now the other thing that you may find helpful is devising some means. You can actually buy them. I've made one myself out of timber, like a securing device, and I've got a little recessed piece of timber there, and I can put my stone in there and then just put that against my sharpening platform, and then I can work the knife to and fro on that. So there are different ways you can do this. This is just something that I've knocked up myself, but it does secure the stone and stop it moving about. That's important. You don't want the stone moving about while you're sharpening. That just keeps it in place. So you can see there this little piece of timber which is cut, and a recess cut out the same size as my sharpening stone. Put the stone in there, and then I can sharpen the knife either way, and I know this is a secure platform and the stone's not going to move about. Okay, so my stones are soaked in water. I've actually been soaking for about 20 minutes now, but 10 minutes should be adequate. So what I'm going to do is take that stone, and we're going to start sharpening the blade. I'm just going to place the stone on this secure platform. And there we are. And we're ready to sharpen. Okay, so now we can start sharpening the knife. Now, I appreciate that different people have their different ways of doing this. Now, some say that you should take between 6 to maybe 8 strokes in one direction on one side of the bevel, and then flip it and then do 8 the other side. Others say other things. Personally, for me, I do 1 stroke each side. I run it down the stone that way, and then I reverse the blade and bring it down the other way. And the reason that I personally do that is because if I'm doing 8 strokes at a time, if I lose count, sometimes I'm distracted and I lose count of how many strokes I've taken, then I may start to build up an uneven edge. You can't lose count with one. And of course, depending where I am on the stone, if I'm at the end of the stone and my blades or the bevel's facing away from me, I know that I've just taken that stroke, so it's just a case of flip it and then bring it back toward me, like so. So I can't lose count. So that's what I do, is I take 1 stroke this way or toward me, and another stroke away from me, and I start with about 8 on each side. Now I can see straight away that is sharpening on the stone, or running down the stone nicely, because the marker pen, it has now disappeared from the hole of the bevel edge. Now I'll just bring you a little bit closer so you can see how I angle the blade on the stone. Now just making sure there's always plenty of water on the stone, just to periodically add more water. So I'm placing the knife, the blade of the knife, flat on the stone, and then I angle it to the bevel. And you don't need to put too much pressure on the knife. Don't force it. A little bit of pressure, but not too much. Let the stone do the work. And then I just simply hold the knife and then take the stroke away from me. Now as you push that, you should really be pushing water, and then behind the blade you'll see that all that's left is a thin film. So I'm actually pushing water, and then all I do is flip that on the same angle on the bevel, so that the bevel's flat on the stone, and then back toward me. So there we are, making sure that that blade is angled on the bevel, away from me, flip, make sure that that angle or the knife is angled on the bevel, and then back toward me. Just making sure. Now what you should see is you should start to see trails of, on the stone, trails of dark material. Well, that's the steel from the blade, and you can see this. You can see the material that's being taken from the blade. There we are, and also you can kind of hear that nice sound. You do start, with practice, you do recognise that sound. There we are. So all I'm doing at the moment is just sharpening the straight part of the blade. So that's 8 times. So now that I've done 8 strokes, just feet, yeah, see that's already quite good. I can feel there's a bit of a burr there as well. So that's, yeah, I'm happy with that actually. So now we'll do the belly of the blade. Now just making sure we add a bit more water on the stone. Now same again, make sure that the bevel is angled correctly and that it's sitting flat on the stone. Now as you push it away from you, you just want to, it takes a little bit of practice, but you'll soon get the hang of it. Just push it away from you, and as you're working around that point, it's almost like you're just lifting the knife slightly. And I just keep my finger on the point of the knife. So you can just see here that as I'm sharpening the belly of the knife, I'm just sweeping the knife, or the belly of the knife, just round a little bit, and raising it as well. You just see the handle there raising slightly. This is to maintain the angle of the bevel as I sharpen it, and then I reverse and do the same the other side. Just lifting the blade, or angling the blade up slightly as I work the belly of the knife around. Yeah, that's pretty sharp. There we are, just a few more strokes to finish off, and we've got a reasonably sharp edge now. Now you'll notice on the bevel of the knife, particularly if we look close up, that there will be some scratches from the stone. But at this point we don't worry about those, because we're going to reverse the stone in a moment and change it to the 3000 grit. And any scratches there, well, they'll be polished out as well, so it will bring our bevel up almost to a mirror finish. It will polish it off nicely. So we'll do that. We'll reverse the stone to the 3000 grit and repeat the same process that we just carried out with the 800 grit. So it's just a repeat of what we've just done. So there we are, we've reversed the stone. Now using that same process on this 3000 grit. A stroke in one direction away and a return stroke back. And you can see the material that's being left on the stone as well. But this really will hone the blade nicely. There we are. Now as I'm sharpening using the 3000 grit, you'll notice that your blade, or the material from your blade, will quite quickly clog up your stone. So if you see areas of dark material on the stone, you want to remove those, because the stone's not really working effectively or sharpening your edge, honing the edge with that material in the stone. So all we do to remove that is you just take your Nagura stone, and as you can see here in the video, you can see what I'm doing, is I'm just rubbing that Naguru stone up and down all over that 3000 grit stone, and that will remove any of that material. We can then commence or continue sharpening then. So periodically, if you see that dark material start to clog up, build up in the stone, where it being a finer grit, it will happen more easily. Just put the Naguru, or use your Naguru stone just to take that out, and then you can continue sharpening. So once you're happy that you've got a keen edge to your bevel on the blade of your knife, just to finish off, what we do is, again with the 3000 grit, is we just take our Naguru stone, and as you can see here, I'm just rubbing it on the 3000 grit, building up a nice slurry, and then we'll just take a few extra strokes on the stone with the knife just to finish off our sharpening. And this will just help to bring that blade to a nice hone. So just a few final finishing strokes on the stone with the Naguru slurry that's on there, and that's just bringing that to a really nice edge now. And I'm just checking that edge, just testing that edge with my finger as I go. What you can do then is just take some of that slurry and just rub some over the blade of your knife, and any stains or any old tanning that you got on there from any wood that you may have cut in the past, well, that'll help to remove that, just give that blade a nice clean up. So that's the final part of sharpening on the stones themselves. So now we go to the next stage. So to finish off the sharpening process, you'll see here that I'm taking a strop board, or a paddle board, as is often referred to. Now you'll see that on mine I did actually have a handle on the end, but I removed that because I found storage in my rucksack a little difficult with that. And all it basically is a piece of timber with a piece of leather of the same size fixed to one side of the board. What we then do is we take some stropping compound, and we then load that leather up with this compound. You can see here that I'm using the blue stropping compound, often referred to, or commonly referred to laughingly, as Smurf poo, but this is a great compound that's really does work well. Now often on a cold day it can be quite a little difficult to load the leather up with the compound, because the compound can be quite brittle in the cold, and so often what it does is it can flake off the strop, or it may leave areas where the compound will adhere to the leather and other areas where it flakes off. It can be a little bit of a problem, as you can see here. But there's a fairly simple fix for this. All you need to do is to take a blowtorch, as I'm doing here, or a hot air gun, that'll do the same thing, and just heat up or warm up the leather. Be careful not to burn it, of course, but just warm that leather up, and also warm the compound itself up as well. And then you'll find that compound will be much easier to apply to the leather, to load the leather up as well. And that will cover it nicely. And we want all of the leather strop covered with the compound. Here we see here a nice even application of the compound all over the leather, and this will make stropping our knife much better. So on our stropping stroke, we always strop with the blade coming toward us. We would never strop with the blade going away from us. Obviously that would cut into the leather strop and would achieve nothing. So, and you can see there that I'm just reversing the blade and repeating the process for the other side of the bevel. And I normally would give between 6 and 12 strokes, more if needed, but this will normally bring that edge, or finish that edge, to a lovely razor, almost razor sharpness. It really does bring it up well. Now as you're stropping the blade, you want to be mindful to exert a fair amount of pressure on the when stropping. It's a little bit more, or quite a bit more pressure than when sharpening. You really want to really get that compound working on the edge of the blade. I find that when I really do exert some pressure on the blade and draw that blade backwards, it really does finish it nicely. Yeah, that's razor sharp now, really sharp. Now we're nearly there, we're nearly finished, and this is something which is really optional really, but it's something that I always do, is I use a little bit of auto sole metal polish, and with a rag just finish off that blade, any old stains or tanning that there may be left on the blade, not the bevel will be clean, but anything that is left on the blade, that auto sole will remove it, and it will just finish that bevel off nicely as well. It just leaves the blade nice and clean. Now as you're doing this, just be mindful that you've got a very sharp edge now, so what I tend to do is use circular motions going away from the edge of the blade. That way I'm not going to cut myself. Be very careful not to use a circular motion or a polishing motion where you're bringing your finger toward the edge of the blade. That's more than likely going to end up with a nasty cut. Always polish, as you can see here, away from the edge of the blade. That's important. So you can see now that we've finished sharpening the blade, and as you can see, it's a mirror finish there. That really is nice and sharp. There we are. So we're almost finished. There's just one final thing that I always like to do. So last of all, what I do is I take some coconut oil. That's what I use for just coating my knife, my blade. Just give it a coating of coconut oil. The reason I use coconut oil is because it's solid, and so it doesn't run everywhere. It's not messy. But the fact that it's solid as well, it gives a nice coat that tends to stay on the blade as well. It's not rubbed off or other fabrics and so forth. And of course it's food safe as well, so I don't need to worry about using my knife in food preparation if that's what I'm going to do with it. I know that the coconut oil won't be a problem. And what I tend to do is when I've been using my knife out in the field, at the end of each day I'll quickly strop the blade on my strop and give it a coating of coconut oil as well, and that helps to just stop any corrosion on the blade. When I'm out in the field, of course, there may be instances where I'll need to bring my edge of my blade back, and I just use this 1000 grit whetstone here, which I pre-soak, and then just run the blade up and down that a few times. You can see there's a nice wedge shape on the edge of the stone, which is useful for standing the stone up at an angle. And also on the top edge of the stone, that top edge there you'll see is the same profile as the top of a wind down windscreen on the passenger side or driver's side of a car. So as you can do with the screen of a car, you can just run very lightly run the edge of the blade and strop that across that curve, and that will just bring that knife back again. It'll just keep that edge maintained. I don't put any pressure on at all there, just let the weight of the knife do the work. And of course, another very important aspect of knife maintenance is just ensuring that when you've finished with your knife and you're going to be storing it at the end of the day or the end of a field trip, before you return it to its sheath, just ensure that it's absolutely dry and that there's no moisture on it at all, particularly if you're going to be storing it again for long periods. And if you do ensure that there's no moisture on it at all, then you should not get any corrosion on your knife. And being high carbon steel A blade, which this particular knife is, it would be prone to corrosion if we left moisture on it, so that's important. Well, there we are, a sharpened, cleaned oil knife. And one final test, you really want to make this, this really should be sharp enough to be able to slice through a piece of paper. So let's just try that. There we are. That's how sharp your blade should be. There we are. Well, there we are, knife sharpening and maintenance. So I hope you found that that useful, particularly if you're starting out. Oh, in the next video, knife skills number 3, we'll be looking at knife cuts. So join me next time for that one. So if this is your first time at Isle of Wight Bushcraft, why not click on the subscribe button below, and that will give you access to a whole load of other content as well. And if you click on the notification bell beside it, then you'll be notified of all upcoming videos. And any comments you'd like to leave, well, I always do my best to answer those, so if you can, just leave a comment below. And also, why not leave a like and a share? That really does help the channel. Well, there we are, folks. That's all for this video. Hopefully I'll see you next time, but until then, take care.